thank you, Kirk. I think what you said about moving from burden to opportunity is a great way to think about all of our conversations here. So for our next group, we'd like to welcome to the stage some experts in agriculture and food supply. Climate change is increasingly putting our world's food supply at risk, as you all know. In August, Bloomberg News reported on an IPCC report that with more extreme weather, stable food production will be increasingly imperiled, and that's going to threaten the world's poorest populations first. So here to discuss how the agriculture industry is working to develop innovative solutions to solve the world's food production challenges are leaders from Syngenta, Innovating, and Alko Animal Health in conversation with NYU professor Tansi Whalen. Please welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Lauren. And good morning, everybody. How are you all? Great. So it's a great pleasure to share the stage with these fabulous women who are doing terrific work in their sectors. We have, to my right, Alexandra Brand, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Syngenta. And then we have Julie Lawless, who is Senior VP Corporate Affairs at Alko Animal Health. And then Sanaz Rosinski, I did it right? We practiced. Managing Director, Head of Sustainability for Innovating. So as we heard from Lauren, agriculture is one of the areas that both has a significant footprint itself and will be affected by the changes we're seeing in climate change, in water variability, et cetera. We know that agriculture, according to IPCC, is responsible for about 23% of global emissions, both from land use changes and from emissions from the process of agriculture itself. We also know that there's significant challenges related to antibiotics, to soil degradation, to biodiversity loss. Agriculture uses 60% of the world's fresh water. And yet we all have to eat, right? Mm-hmm. And we also, agriculture supports a wide variety of people who work in the sector, so it provides a significant amount of jobs as well. So we have some trailblazers here who are really working to do very interesting work to tackle some of these challenges. And I want to sort of quickly, before I kick it off, just say as well that one of the areas that we're seeing, in addition to interest by investors and corporates in this, is also growing interest by consumers in products that do have a positive sustainable impact. We just released the first ever analysis of consumer packaged good data and found that from 2013 to 2018, 50% of the growth in consumer packaged goods, which includes food products at retail, directly, we looked at 73,000 SKUs, 50% of the growth came from sustainability marketed products. So there is increasing demand and interest by consumers for companies who are doing the right thing. So let me ask all of you a question to kick us off. And starting with you, Alexandra, how are you as a company approaching the daunting challenge of climate change and the impact it will have on the world's agricultural systems?
Yeah, so we first and foremost have listened. We went out to our customers, we went out to environmental groups, and we were trying to understand the issue. And the evidence is very clear. We had the worst ever flooding in the United States this year in its history. We are in the third year of drought in Australia, the hottest ever measured temperatures in France. So we have a problem, and growers are turning towards us when we ask them and say, look, we need help. And then we said, we need to put real money behind it. This is not anymore about a couple of pilot projects. We want to repurpose part of the investments we do into a step change of sustainability of agriculture. And we announced yesterday that we will invest $2 billion in that and drive forward 2 breakthroughs in agriculture every year. That's an announcement, and you can say, does it stand on solid grounds? And I really believe that we can make a difference. With, being out and listening, we were able to form partnerships, and most prominently, the Nature Conservancy helped us and guided us through finding ways for investing this money to drive sustainability forward. Our biggest initiative at the moment is in Brazil, where we are working on degraded soils together with banks, the financial sector, together with growers and academia, to bring these soils back into agriculture production, and with that take pressure off the Amazon, take pressure off the Cerrado biomes, allow on these soils not only food to be grown, but also nature again to thrive with really good landscape corridors. And we can do that on millions and millions of hectares. So this business model has been set up in partnership, and I'm very confident that when we find more of these examples, when the technologies are available, when companies come together to make that happen with growers, that we can drive change.
And really take it to scale, which is...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great.
Julie, I wonder if you could share with us what you're doing on
certainly.
climate change.
So Alko Animal Health, we just spun out from Eli Lilly and Company a little less than a year ago, which was a perfect opportunity for us to step back and say, what is our healthy purpose? What is our purpose? We're a purpose-driven company. We believe in solving food insecurity. Also, on the companionship side, the power of pets. And really, we stepped back and said, this is really about, it's starting with animals. We believe animals can actually be the way to solve some of these challenges. We were talking earlier about some of the, I think, unknown statistics. 1 in 5 farm animals die from disease. That's a really compelling statistic when you look at 75% more protein needed by 2050. How do we do that without impacting the planet? We make animals healthier. We can't add more animals. It's just not possible. So I think we've got a lot of opportunity there. And some of the ways we've been working is really taking a step back and looking at our strategy and saying, this needs to be mutually beneficial between us, our customers, our employees, the planet. We have some interesting projects, shared value projects, where we're going to share smallholder farmers in Africa, for instance, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to build sustainable food systems with healthy animals from the start. Let's really look at the livelihoods of farmers. And let's look at, the sustainability of those animals. So some very interesting work there that you can't do just by yourself. You really need a system around you to do that work. And then also on the ESG side, really talking with our investors about why that's important, why feeding the world really is, it's not only our business, but it's our moral responsibility to really do it in the most sustainable way. You mentioned AMR. So, we are one of the makers of antibiotics for animals. And we certainly, in 2015, also said it's our responsibility to make sure that farmers and veterinarians are using antibiotics in the right way and reducing the need, and for us to look at innovation to create those alternatives. So really looking through not just philanthropy here and business here, but how do these things come together?
We'll come back to that topic, but also I think really interesting how the two of you both are pointing to the fact that you really need to work with these smallholders, farmers, to provide them with support to navigate both climate change, but also other sets of challenges that small farmers have. I wonder, Sanaz, if you could tell us a bit about Naveen and what your strategy is around climate and sustainable agriculture from an investor perspective.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about our history. Our parent company, TIAA, and Naveen, we've really been at the forefront of responsible investing, and you really just need to look at the client base of TIAA, right? We're serving teachers, educators, really that segment of the market, healthcare providers that have a vested interest in society and the environment doing better. So in 2017, our parent company, TIAA, endorsed the recommendations of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD, which has elements of scenario analysis and disclosure on climate-related risk. So at Naveen, we formed this interdisciplinary working group where we're looking to evaluate the impact of climate risk on our investments. And as a large institutional, I think largest globally in farmland, obviously the physical impact of climate change is extremely important. But it's not just the impact of climate change on our investments, it's also how our investments are exacerbating the impacts the negative impacts on climate change. So there are three things that we've really embarked on. first and foremost is we're really investing in climate data, really trying to see where are we exposed most, which farms are more susceptible to climate change risk. And, just to put that in context, if you look at, we're a large investor in farmland permanent crops in California, for example, which is very prone to wildfires. So the investment in this analysis and looking at the data really helps prioritize which farms are more at risk. And it helps you come up with a mitigating strategy and work with farm managers to make that farm more resilient when wildfires do occur. But once you have that framework, it also helps you in avoiding risk when you're making acquisitions, because those risks are now absolutely going to be considered in the acquisition process. Some of the other things that we've embarked on is, we have policies and standards. We're actually working with our peers to build a standard for sustainability in agriculture, really akin to what exists in forestry. And we also have our own zero deforestation policy in Brazil. You mentioned the Cerrado. So there's also those policies that we hope will limit or mitigate some of the negative impact of agriculture to climate change. And then the final thing I would talk about is transparency. We're really transparent about what we do. We have a sustainability report that we publish. We have an interactive map that really shows the location of where the farms are, whether it's irrigated, it's not, and the types of crops that are being grown and rotated. So I think transparency is another element.
Yeah. So fascinating. So just to follow up on that, how do you as an investor have that type of drilled down engagement with the farmers around that specific, sort of how do you help them, and is that your role to help them implement sustainable practices that are going to make them more resilient and avoid risk, right? And what kind of, you talked about developing a standard, both what type of criteria will you have, and then how you actually assess whether they're meeting that standard, and if they don't, how do you bring them along, right? So I'd love to hear, I think, a little bit more about how you're going to be implementing this, because that sounds quite ambitious and exciting.
Sure. Happy to get into that. So again, I think a lot of this goes back to the parent company and our history and responsible investing. So when we first started making investments in agriculture, there was no standard, there was no framework. And in the absence of that, we partnered with the UN Principles for Responsible Investment and other agricultural investments to create it. So I think it was in 2011 that the UN PRI launched the Farmland Guidelines. And so since then, we have developed a set of key performance indicators to track and monitor our performance against these guidelines. And we have, over 500 farms, and it is absolutely tracked at the farm level and rolled up, and it's published in our annual report.
Sorry, are those 500 farms in the United States solely?
No.
Okay.
It's a global.
Right.
We're in 7 countries, including Brazil and some other emerging markets, and so. When we prioritize our attention and our focus, of course, you can't be in every location at the same time. So there is certainly a prioritization that happens. So in terms of ensuring or trying to promote sustainable practices, one of the things we do, for example, in Brazil, is we audit. We have a third party that audits our tenant farm operators on their sustainability performance, and the results of that audit is then shared with them. And we help them come up with mitigating plans to address particularly the larger ticket items that were noted by this third party. We have 30, 60, 90, 365-day plans that are set in place. And then the first time we did the audit was in 2015, and shortly after that we decided, with the NGO that was helping us with this, that we should probably draft a code of conduct that can really set the expectation of what we expect of these tenants. So that has now been also completed in Brazil, and we deliver that to tenants before they even sign on to the lease.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that this actually improves the financial performance of these farms? So, for example, do they have lower cost of capital because they're doing these types of practices? Do you see that in your investment?
So I think in most asset classes, but particularly in agriculture, sustainability and cost go hand in hand. If they improve, if they optimize water delivery to the crops, that absolutely feeds into the bottom line. So yes.
Great. Thank you. I'd love to learn more. You started to mention this around livestock management, some of the challenges associated with that, and some of the concerns that have been raised around overuse of antibiotics and the impact that it might have on human health or on getting into our waterways and so on. But recognizing as well the demands on increasing the amount of livestock that we have out there. What specific programs and initiatives are you putting in place to tackle that challenge?
That's a really good question. We've done a few things from an 8-point plan. We went to the White House in 2015 and said, we're going to commit to reducing the need for antibiotics, working closely with farmers, and then also from an innovation standpoint, how do we develop alternatives? Whether it's, nutritional health, you really need to look at the microbiome of, say, a cow, and the enzymes and probiotics and prebiotics that you can use really for a preventive measure more than treating the disease. So the disease maybe won't set in, right? We have quite a few experts that we've put on staff at Alko to go out and work directly with farmers. So we call that our value beyond product, right? We're not just making products and selling them. We're also working on education, because I think, sort of as you mentioned, farmers see clearly the economic benefits and the benefits to the earth. I think, don't overlook their passion for the earth and wanting to improve their own operations. So we'll send experts out in, we believe animal welfare and the environment go hand in hand. And so we really need to look at that full holistic picture. So sending our experts out, not just in smallholder farmer situations, right here in the United States, there's a lot of opportunity when we talk about large livestock operations and the sophistication that exists there, and really the desire and the need to continue to do better and better. So it's interesting. Yeah.
And are you, in terms of R&D, do you see opportunities for new types of medicines that might, address the challenge but have less of a negative potential impact?
Yeah. I think certainly when we look at that nutritional health space, you look at vaccines and you look at nutritional health, I believe those, that is where we're leaning in pretty heavily when we look at our innovation portfolio. Partnering with companies there are a lot of great startups in the animal health sector. And so we're partnering with those startups and really understanding how can you reduce that need and really preserve antibiotics for humans.
Terrific. Great, thank you.
So
Alexandra, for Syngenta, there's, and I'm asking the tough questions here because I know you all can do well with this, but there's questions around the current sort of agriculture model in terms of too many agrochemicals, challenges with runoff, challenges with GMOs, series of overuse of water, monoculture impacts, right? So I'd love to hear about how Syngenta is tackling that through your programs to ensure that there's sustainable agriculture for the producers, for your company, and for consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes to all of that. Yes to all of the challenges. They exist in certain agricultural systems. For example, in China, we're a Chinese-owned company. The government has clearly recognized that agriculture needs to change. There is an overuse of pesticides. There's a massive overuse of fertilizers. The soil are degraded. And basically, the millions of smallholder growers in China, they hardly can make a living. So the Chinese government is also looking at rural vitalization. How do they hold the people in the villages and provide valuable workplaces? And that's a challenge we have in front of us as a company. And basically our owners have pretty high demands on us to help, with that agricultural change. And we can do a lot. We are a believer in technology. We are an R&D company. So we said, a lot of the digital technology which are now coming in, soil mapping, for example, soil quality mapping, soil fertility mapping, together with weather mapping, you can give growers much more specific advice when to use fertilizers, when to not use fertilizers, when to spray when a certain insect is coming in to eat the crop or a disease is coming, precision application technologies, sensors which recognize a certain disease. You can apply that almost like a pharmaceutical, very, very precise when you want to fight a disease. So these are all technologies which are coming in, which where we need to find economic models for growers. Because, I mean, a large Brazilian farmer has funds and financing in a good year to experiment with that. A smallholder in China, no way. So we are currently investing in an agricultural platform network, modern agricultural platform, with 150 outlets in China, where we can, in a leasing way, provide these technologies to growers, that also smallholder growers can profit from that, and we can get, these systems out of the unsustainable space into something which is really improving productivity for food production, incomes for growers, and, within the planetary boundary which we have in the respective systems. It's not an easy task. You can't do that alone. And the expectations are high on companies, and that's why I'm always looking for partners who have joint interest, who also have commercial interest, because I do believe, when you have sustainability in your P&L as a driver, it really accelerates things versus philanthropy. Yeah. So that's why I'm looking for people who also want to kind of help transform the system.
And so maybe we should partner on the animal side.
Yes.
When we talk about disease.
That's
African swine fever in Asia has wiped out what would be the equivalent of 3 herds of pigs for the United States in China.
It's a massive professionalization what's currently coming into animal in China, absolutely.
And so
I was also thinking, we could collaborate on financing the Brazilian model.
Put something together. But it really is true, even on the animal side, bringing small package sizes of animal health products to smallholder farmers is a challenge that we're tackling because, our products come in giant bags for giant farms.
Right.
But if you don't have access to these products, disease spreads.
That's one point. And if they're then wrongly used, the growers kind of overpay and you get the adverse effects on the animal and the environment.
That's exactly right.
And it's a pretty intensive model when you really want to handhold smallholders through that. In a country like China with that business potential, you can start financing that through your P&L. In countries like Africa, where you have much more political uncertainty around agricultural policy, it's more difficult to do that because, when you invest in that, you're in it for 10, 15, 20 years. You can't just kind of, with a bit of currency devaluation, just pull out of a country when you seriously want to get into that.
So one of the challenges that I see with farmers, and let me just do a shout out, having run Rainforest Alliance and worked with farmers all over the world. Farmers are amazing. They're like Renaissance men and women. They have to do everything, right? They have to take care of the books. They have to market. They have to do physical labor. They have to deal with people, managing people. It's incredible, right? So a lot of respect for them. At the same time, particularly with the smallholders, we see that there's not a lot of financial literacy. They don't really understand. So like in China, if you just put more, the idea is, if you put more fertilizer on, you'll double, triple your yields, right? So how are you, helping farmers to understand the financial elements of what they're doing and have better financial literacy so they can see that indeed sustainable agriculture practices result in better performance for them? Is that something that you're working at?
We're doing that in China with our modern agricultural platform networks we are building. It's agronomic advice. It's advice on, the financing model. De-risking also growers, put more risk into our balance sheet versus the grower balance sheet. So these are in these sort of markets where you have really, a solid agricultural policy, you can do that.
Right.
It's much more challenging to build something like that up in Africa, where we're also working collaborations like the Field to Market Alliance with banks, with input providers, with academia, with seeds breeding institutes to help growers to access input tools, to find market access for their produce, get financing, insurance around the season. But scaling that up, I think we are at the moment at 500,000 growers with a target of getting up to 10 million. It's really, really tough to stick this ecosystem together and sustain it and make it kind of self-carry forward. It's everything but easy.
So I want to come back and hear more about partnerships, and I'm going to take the partnership question to you first, Sanaz. In your work, clearly you need partners to take things to the scale you want to. So who are you working with? How are you working with them? What are the challenges? And what kind of advice can you bring to people in the audience around how to build effective partnerships?
Yeah, so I think from an industry level, if you look, farmland is held in the hands of farmers. More than 99% of farms globally are held by farmers. So institutional investors really represent a very small percentage of that. So I think collaborating with our peers, other farmland managers, is absolutely important for our success. If we own land in Illinois and we are looking to lease it to a tenant and we have these stringent criteria from a sustainability perspective, and the farm next door does not, they will move over, and so it will be a competitive disadvantage to us. So to that point, we have gathered as large farmland managers to create a sustainability certification and a standard, because what's available right now is pretty crop specific. Some of them are region specific. But if you look at forestry, they have, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative or the Forestry Stewardship Council. That doesn't exist in agriculture. So we have come together, it was in 2017, when we started building a holistic, all-encompassing standard with 6 of our peers and 2 NGOs to do exactly that.
And so NGOs which NGOs? So NGOs were an important part of that strategy, right, in addition to the companies?
Absolutely, because we need that scientific and environmental background, and it needs to be done independently. The other partnerships we have at a more local level is also with NGOs, and you mentioned Rainforest Alliance. Actually, our partner in Brazil is Imaflora, which is their sister organization, I think. What we try to do in a place like Brazil, obviously, communities are of utmost importance. Without communities, you don't have farmers. Without farmers, you don't have farms to operate. So what we've done is we are looking, and we implemented this last year internally, and then we outsourced it to Imaflora, is to do an assessment of what is the impact of our buying this farm on this community. And what we're hoping to do is, first of all, it brings credibility, it builds trust, but it also helps us if we're looking to allocate dollars on a CSR, for a corporate responsibility perspective, and we should talk about this. How do we allocate it? What are the needs of that community? And it's very important to have an NGO that is really familiar with the needs of that community to be involved in the process.
Great, terrific. Julie, I wonder if you could share a little bit, maybe a specific example of a partnership that you have that you find would be useful.
That would be good. So I would say there's a couple of partnerships. The one that I've talked most about here is our East Africa Growth Accelerator with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That was a key project for us to really go in and help establish food systems there in Africa. Probably the unknown partners for us are employees. Employee engagement. We asked our employees, we're just launching the Alko Foundation, which is our philanthropic arm. And our employees said, I want to use my skills and my expertise to help farmers and veterinarians. And so they're kind of that is a partner base that we should not overlook as companies, because especially our millennial workforce really wants to use their skills and expertise to do good versus writing a check. Like Gen Xers may want to write a check, but they want to be out there and really making a difference. And then I think our customers. So we work with the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And so we partner with our customers. So the suppliers are McDonald's and others that are working to really make a difference in that area.
Thank you. And Alexandra, you just announced a brand new partnership. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that. And
the Nature Conservancy is our partner in that, and we've announced that although we are working already together since many years, and we've signed this mutual agreement for a strategic partnership already 2 years ago. For us, it was very important to first start the work before we talk about the work, to find trust and a relationship where we can really say, okay, that's working for both parts. It's not so common that an NGO like the Nature Conservancy would team up with a pesticide company. And you can imagine, it takes from both sides really a large amount of work towards each other to understand that actually we have a lot of things in common, because we are both science-based organizations. So our people in research and development, they find common ground with the scientists of Nature Conservancy to say, okay, Nature Conservancy optimizes for nature conservation outcome. We optimize for agricultural productivity, but it's both science-based, so people can really communicate. So that was a conscious decision we took, that we say we first start the work, we first get certainty that we find a lot of common ground which we can agree on and drive that forward at scale, the projects, before, talking publicly about it. We also had, really good conversation on items where we disagree. And this challenge back to Syngenta is very, very valuable. It goes up to top management, items where the Nature Conservancy really thinks we would need to do things absolutely differently. And we can take that into our decision making. So it's this kind of transparency towards your partners, this openness of really, we've opened up our entire R&D department into the Nature Conservancy. It's in the depths of the strategic heart of this company. It takes some time to do that, and you can't do that when you're on stage. You first need to do that in-house and gain that certainty that you can really repurpose money you would spend for a certain agricultural system into a different agricultural market.
Terrific. Great. So I think what we've heard is really interesting evolution in the sector, moving from sort of transactional relationships where just, the farmer gives you the stuff and then right, to really figuring out how do you engage and support the challenges that they have, both as farmers economically, but also from a sustainability perspective, and really direct engagement, whether you're an investor or animal welfare or seeds and agrochemical company. So I think we want to turn it over now to Lee Berlin, who has questions from the audience, right?
This one's Hello?
There we go.
This one's piggybacking off of the last conversation. I think it's about trade-offs. So the question was, it says, food insecurity will rise due to climate change, and as we heard earlier, demand for sustainable biofuels for air travel is also rising. Do you support the use of viable farmland to fuel something like air travel when it could be used to feed those around the globe who live in constant hunger?
Maybe Alexandra?
That's a really tough question, to be honest. I'm personally not a too big fan of biofuels for transport. I do think transport, especially road transport, has different ways to look at getting that done in terms of electricity and getting better renewable energy forms than biofuels. For air travel, my technical understanding is that, something like battery technology wouldn't be available for air traffic. So one could consider that, but I wouldn't say this is kind of my very first priority, to be really honest. I think, land should be for growers, for food production. I think that should be really the priority. And as we are getting more people, I think we really should rather look at producing healthy foods.
Great, thank you. All right, let's have a little fun here. Geared towards Sanaz and Nuveen, with the legalization of cannabis, a formerly in-the-dark agricultural industry is coming online. Is Nuveen or investors overall looking at that industry for investment? What would the cannabis industry need to become a sustainable ag industry?
So the short answer is no. We are not currently looking to make investments in cannabis. Some of our investments are driven by the values of our constituents, and unless that changes, I don't foresee moving into that industry.
For anyone, are you seeing opportunities to invest in regenerative agricultural solutions in a scalable way?
Sorry, who was that for?
Just
anybody.
I personally think regenerative agriculture is potentially one of the solutions. We see parts of it in, elements of regenerative agriculture in parts of our portfolio. So the question is, for example, in Brazil, there's no tillage. It's only the use of cover crops in our portfolio. How do we bring those learnings and practices at a global scale and share that with the farmers across our portfolio? And so those are some of the things that we're working on. We're also piloting programs where regenerative practices are being tested and here in the U.S. and in our portfolio.
Julie, anything to add on your end?
Yeah, I would just say, we like to say that livestock they are the original recyclers. So if you look at what they eat versus what we can eat, they're often eating, a lot of the, I would say, the non-arable land that we're not able to farm. So I think that's an important point for us, as well as just, really understanding that disease challenge. And as we said earlier, the 1 in 5, bringing that number down when we talk about death and morbidity. Yeah.
So we're big supporters of a coexistence of different agricultural systems. Regenerative agriculture is not a term which is very clearly defined. Right. Neither is conservation agriculture, neither is climate smart agriculture, or agroforestry, for example. But different lands, different agroclimatic situation, different crop markets, offtake markets. They will need to take into account elements of these different agricultural forms to make the whole more sustainable. So I do think, that agriculture will transform into more biodiverse systems, into systems which rotate crops in a different ways, which contains intercropping, cover crops. So I really do believe that, but I do think it will be a coexistence of systems.
Great. Thank you. I have one more. I think any of you could probably answer this. How do your employee engagement efforts with your employees, do you expect them to contribute as volunteers or within their job roles and responsibilities as it relates to the community?
Yeah, I would say for us, we ask both of them. I mean, they do want to contribute in both ways. We want to use their expertise. We have technical experts that can go into the field and help farmers and veterinarians. So I think both.
Alexandra?
It's both. For me, the stronger element will be that they contribute in their day-to-day work, because this would be, for me, an expression that sustainability is fully in our investments, fully in our P&L, and in our strategy.
Same. It's both. And, again, at TIAA, there are a lot of efforts to support employees that are looking to volunteer, and we try to, I see the red. And we have conference calls where we educate employees. So I personally have had a conference call or a WebEx where I have walked through some of the work that we do, and I have had inbound emails of folks requesting to see how they can be involved. So
I have one more. Can I do one more? We're going into a break anyway, right? All right, great. Sanaz. Here it is. Hold on. I had it for 2 seconds. How do you talked about climate? Oh, someone took it away. Oh no, here it is. You mentioned climate data you use to make decisions. Can you share any more detail, like the specific tools or programs you use and what you are measuring?
Yeah. So we are going through a process of piloting different portfolios. So, for example, for agriculture, we piloted the California permanent crops with a third-party provider. And I'm happy to get into the details of that, but I'm not sure if I can.
You've got to keep it short. Lauren told me. She keeps me on a short leash. Okay.
But it is through a third-party provider that is doing the scenario analysis.
Well, thanks so much to a great panel. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzi. Thanks, everyone. Right.